At 22:47 hours on April 27, 1942, Flight Lieutenant John Cunningham climbed into his de Havilland Mosquito night fighter at RAF Castle Camps, preparing for a patrol that would demonstrate technology the Germans didn't yet understand. Cunningham was 24 years old, already credited with 15 night kills flying Beaufighters. His aircraft, one of the new Mosquito NF-2s recently delivered to No. 157 Squadron, sat on the hard stand, with engines ticking as they cooled between flights. Somewhere in the darkness above southern England, German bombers were approaching. The ground controllers knew they were coming. Radar stations along the coast tracked them. But finding a single bomber in 10,000 cubic miles of black sky was still nearly impossible. Until now. The Mosquito was radical by 1942 standards. Twin-engine, two-man crew, built almost entirely from wood. No defensive armament, just 420mm cannons and 4.303 machine guns pointing forward, maximum speed of 380 miles per hour, faster than most fighters of the era. But speed wasn't what made this aircraft revolutionary. Inside the nose, Sergeant Jimmy Rawnsley was already checking the equipment that had been changing night warfare since they'd flown together in Beaufighter's the AI Mark IV radar, Airborne Interception radar, a system that could detect enemy aircraft in complete darkness at ranges up to 4 miles. Before radar-equipped night fighters, the RAF's night defense was mostly guesswork. Ground controllers vectored fighters toward known bomber streams. Pilots searched visually, hoping to spot exhaust flames or silhouettes against clouds. On moonless nights, interception rates were below 2%. The Germans owned the darkness. Their bombers struck London, Coventry, Birmingham, and dozens of other cities with relative impunity. British night fighters flew thousands of sorties, but rarely found targets. The Luftwaffe lost more aircraft to accidents and anti-aircraft fire than to fighters. The problem was fundamental. Visual range at night was measured in hundreds of yards. Bombers could be half a mile away and completely invisible. Even with searchlights and ground direction, pilots couldn't find what they couldn't see. The RAF needed a way to extend a pilot's vision beyond what human eyes could achieve. They needed to see in darkness. The solution was radar, but miniaturizing ground radar systems to fit in aircraft required solving problems that seemed impossible in 1940. The chain-home radar network, protecting Britain, used massive towers and equipment buildings. The transmitter alone weighed several tons. Making something similar work in a fighter aircraft meant reducing size and weight by factors of 100 while maintaining effectiveness. The first attempts were crude. AI Mark IV could barely detect aircraft at 1-mile range. The operator stared at a cathode ray tube showing fuzzy green blips that appeared and disappeared randomly. Distinguishing real targets from ground returns or electronic noise was more art than science. By 1941, AI Mark IV had improved dramatically. The radar operator could detect aircraft at 3 to 4 miles, track them through turns, and guide the pilot to visual range. The system used 2 antennas in the aircraft's nose. One transmitted pulses. The other received echoes bouncing off metal aircraft. The returning signals appeared on 2 separate scopes. One showed azimuth, left or right. The other showed elevation, up or down. The operator gave the pilot steering corrections until the blips centered on both scopes, meaning the target was directly ahead. Cunningham and Rawnsley had been flying together for 8 months, first in Beaufighters, now in Mosquitoes. They had developed a working rhythm that made interceptions seem routine. Rawnsley called headings and altitudes. Cunningham flew precisely, trusting directions completely, even when they seemed wrong. The pilot flew blind, seeing nothing but instruments. The radar operator saw the invisible, translating electronic signals into navigation commands. Together, they were the most effective night-fighting team in the RAF. On this particular night, ground control vectored them toward a raid approaching Portsmouth. Rawnsley picked up the contact at 3.5 miles, slightly below their altitude. He called contact, 2 degrees port, slightly below, range 3 miles. Cunningham banked left, descended 500 feet. Rawnsley updated constantly, steady, range closing, 2 miles. Turn starboard 5 degrees, range 1 mile, dead ahead. At half a mile, Cunningham could see nothing. The night was absolutely black, no moon, solid cloud cover below. Rawnsley kept talking. 600 yards, slightly above now. Cunningham climbed gently. At 400 yards, he finally saw it. Exhaust flames, faint blue glow from twin engines. A Heinkel. He 111, steady on course, crew completely unaware a fighter was behind them. Cunningham closed to 200 yards, positioned slightly below and behind. The Heinkel filled his gun sight. He fired a 2-second burst. The 20-millimeter cannons were devastatingly effective. The Heinkel's port engine exploded. The bomber rolled left, nose down, trailing fire. It fell through the clouds and crashed near Romsey. 7 German airmen died. The entire interception, from first radar contact to guns firing, took 4 minutes. The Germans never knew what killed them. This was the pattern Cunningham and Rawnsley repeated night after night. Between 1940 and 1942, Cunningham was credited with 20 night kills, all achieved using AI radar. The press loved him. They called him Cat's Eyes Cunningham, claiming he ate carrots to improve his night vision. The RAF intelligence encouraged this story. They wanted the Germans to believe British pilots had exceptional eyesight, not that British aircraft had radar. The deception worked. German intelligence reports from 1941 analyzed British night fighter success and concluded it was due to superior pilot training and searchlight coordination. They never mentioned radar because they didn't know it existed. The Mosquito made everything easier. The Beaufighter was effective but relatively slow and unmaneuverable. The Mosquito was 60 miles per hour faster, climbed better, turned tighter. It could catch any bomber the Luftwaffe had. More importantly, the wooden construction made it lighter. With less weight, the radar worked better. Metal airframes created interference. Wood didn't. The Mosquito's radar returns were cleaner, ranges were longer, and tracking was more reliable. By mid-1942, the Germans finally realized the British had airborne radar. A Junkers Ju-88 equipped with radar crash-landed in Britain. RAF intelligence examined the German equipment and discovered it was less advanced than British systems. This gave the Mosquito night fighters an advantage that would last the rest of the war. But the Germans adapted. They began equipping their bombers with radar warning receivers that detected transmissions from British AI radar. When the warning activated, bomber crews knew a night fighter was nearby. They would take evasive action, diving into clouds, turning sharply, anything to break radar contact. The countermeasures led to a technological race. British radar improved. German warning systems improved. British radar designers developed new frequencies. German receivers detected those too. Back and forth. Throughout 1942 and 1943, each side adapted to the other's innovations. By 1943, Mosquito night fighters were using AI Mark 8 radar, operating on centimetric wavelengths that German warning receivers couldn't detect. The advantage shifted back to British crews. The Mosquito's effectiveness expanded beyond defensive patrols. By 1943, RAF night fighters were conducting intruder missions over occupied Europe. They would patrol near German airfields, waiting for bombers to return from missions over Britain. The German crews, exhausted and low on fuel, were vulnerable during landing. Mosquito crews would detect them on radar, follow them to their airfield, and attack during final approach. The Germans called these Mosquitoes Nachtjagd Teufels, night hunting devils. Squadron leader Bram John Randall Daniel Bram, known as Bob, pioneered intruder tactics. His squadron, 141, operated from bases in England, flying deep into occupied Europe. On June 15, 1943, Bram and his radar operator, Flight Lieutenant Jacobs, penetrated German airspace near Amsterdam. They detected a Junkers Ju-88 returning from a raid Bram followed at 2 miles distance, invisible in darkness. The German aircraft began its landing pattern. As it descended through 1,000 feet, Bram closed to 300 yards and fired. The Ju-88 crashed onto its own runway, blocking it for hours. Bram escaped at low altitude before German fighters could respond. The psychological impact of these intrusions was significant. German bomber crews began fearing their own airspace. Landing became dangerous. Some crews flew extra distance to land at alternate airfields, burning precious fuel. German night fighter squadrons had to provide standing patrols over their own bases, reducing their effectiveness against RAF bomber streams. The Mosquito's ability to see in darkness had shifted the initiative completely. What began as defensive necessity became offensive capability. The radar technology continued evolving. AI Mark X, introduced in 1944, added height-finding capability. The operator could determine target altitude precisely, making interceptions at different heights far easier. The effective range extended to 5 miles. Some exceptional operators could detect large bomber formations at 8 miles in ideal conditions, but technology alone wasn't enough. Success required pilot and radar operator to function as a single unit. The best teams flew together for months, developing intuitive understanding. The operator learned his pilot's habits, how he flew, how he reacted. The pilot learned to trust directions that contradicted his instruments, his instincts, his training. Flight Lieutenant Roderick Chisholm and Flight Sergeant Joe Singleton were such a team. Between December 1943 and March 1944, they destroyed 14 German aircraft, all at night, all using radar-guided interceptions. Their success rate was extraordinary. Other crews averaged 1 kill per 10 sorties. Chisholm and Singleton achieved nearly 50%. They had developed techniques that maximized radar effectiveness. Rather than closing directly from behind, they would parallel the target's course at 1 mile distance, matching speed, maintaining perfect radar contact. Only when positioned, ideally, would they turn in for the attack. This patience gave them higher success rates and lower risk of being detected by German warning receivers. The Luftwaffe's own night fighters used similar technology. German Junkers Ju-80s and Messerschmitt Bf 100s and 10s carried Liechtenstein radar, roughly equivalent to British AI Mark IV. The difference was doctrine. German night fighters primarily defended against RAF bomber streams. They would infiltrate bomber formations, using radar to find individual aircraft, then destroy multiple targets before breaking off. British Mosquitoes hunted alone or in pairs, seeking single targets in empty sky. Both approaches worked, but the Mosquito's speed gave it options German night fighters lacked. When a Mosquito detected a target that turned out to be a German night fighter, the ensuing battle became a contest of radar operators as much as pilots. Both aircraft had radar. Both were trying to position for the first shot. The fight happened in complete darkness. Aircraft maneuvering based entirely on radar returns and instrument readings. Collisions were a real danger. More than one night, fighter crew died when they flew into their target, while closing for the kill. On April 23, 1944, Wing Commander Brance Burbridge and his radar operator, Flying Officer Bill Skelton, engaged a German Ju-88 night fighter near Magdeburg. The German crew detected Burbridge's approach and turned to engage. Both aircraft began a climbing spiral. Each trying to position behind the other, Skelton maintained radar contact throughout, calling adjustments as the German aircraft maneuvered. After 3 minutes of vertical spiraling, Burbridge got positioned 200 yards behind and below. He fired a 3-second burst. The Ju-88 exploded. Burbridge and Skelton went on to become the top-scoring night fighter team in RAF history, with 21 confirmed kills. The Mosquito night fighter variants evolved throughout the war. The NF-2 was followed by the NF-12, NF-13, NF-17, NF-19, and finally, the NF-30. Each version incorporated improved radar, better engines, and refined armament. The NF-30, introduced in early 1945, carried AI Mark X radar and Rolls-Royce Merlin 113/114 engines producing 1,710 horsepower each. Maximum speed was 407 miles per hour, making it faster than virtually any German aircraft except jets. But by 1945, German bomber operations over Britain had ceased. The Mosquito night fighters shifted to offensive operations, escorting bomber streams into Germany, hunting German night fighters, and attacking ground targets. The final kill by an RAF Mosquito night fighter occurred on May 5, 1945. Flight Lieutenant Morris Briggs and Flying Officer George Wright intercepted a Junkers Ju-88 near Kiel. The German aircraft was destroyed by a single burst of cannon fire. 3 days later, Germany surrendered. The Mosquito had flown its last combat mission over Europe. Production of night fighter Mosquitoes totaled approximately 600 aircraft across all variants. They served with multiple RAF squadrons and with Allied air forces. The Royal Australian Air Force operated Mosquitoes in the Pacific, though radar-guided night interceptions were less common in that theater. The heavy jungle, cover, and primitive radar infrastructure limited effectiveness. After the war, Mosquito night fighters continued serving. The RAF maintained several squadrons through the early 1950s. The Israeli Air Force used Mosquitoes during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Some remained in service with smaller air forces into the 1960s. The last operational Mosquito was retired by the RAF in 1963, more than 20 years after the type entered service. The aircraft that had been built as a temporary wartime expedient proved so effective it outlasted its intended service life by decades. John Cunningham survived the war and became a test pilot for de Havilland. He flew the first jet-powered night fighter, the Vampire, and later tested the Comet, the world's first jet airliner. He rarely spoke about his wartime experiences. When asked about his success, he credited Rawnsley and the radar operators he flew with. The cat's eyes story embarrassed him. He knew it was propaganda, but the myth persisted decades after the truth became public knowledge. The AI radar technology developed for the Mosquito formed the foundation for all subsequent airborne radar systems. Modern fighter aircraft still use essentially the same concept: radio waves transmitted forward, returns analyzed to determine target position. The displays have evolved from fuzzy green cathode ray tubes to digital multifunction screens, but the physics remained unchanged. The Mosquito night fighter proved that technology could overcome natural limitations. Human eyes couldn't see in darkness. Radar could. By combining advanced technology with skilled crews, the RAF transformed night defense from hopeless guesswork into precise interceptions. The wooden construction that seemed primitive became an advantage. Modern stealth aircraft use composite materials specifically because they reduce radar reflections. The Mosquito achieved partial stealth through wood construction, 80 years before stealth became a design priority. This wasn't intentional, but the effect was real. German radar operators reported that British wooden aircraft were harder to detect than metal bombers. The Mosquito night fighter represented a turning point in aerial warfare. Before AI radar, night combat was rare and mostly ineffective. After AI radar, night became another battlefield where technological advantage determined victory. The Germans never fully solved the problem of defending against radar-equipped night fighters. Their warning receivers helped, but couldn't overcome the fundamental advantage British crews possessed. They could see the invisible. The crews who flew these missions rarely received recognition given to day fighter pilots or bomber crews. Night fighting was invisible warfare. No aerial photographs documented kills. No ground observers witnessed combat. Success was measured in enemy aircraft that never returned, in bombers that crashed in darkness, in German crews who died without understanding what killed them. Cunningham, Bram, Burbridge, and hundreds of other night fighter crews fought a war the public never saw. They flew in darkness, hunted invisible enemies, relied entirely on technology and teamwork. They proved that in modern warfare, the ability to see first often matters more than the ability to shoot first. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. It helps more people discover these important pieces of history. Subscribe to stay connected with stories of the aircraft and crews that shaped the Second World War, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering those who served.